The tale of Heracles' sixth labor, a story known far and wide across the lands of Hellas. This is not merely a myth of gods and heroes, but one that speaks to the hearts of all men. In it, we will find lessons that transcend time, showing us not only the triumphs of a great hero, but also the struggles we ourselves face in the shadows of modern life. In the ancient times, Heracles, the mighty son of Zeus, was tasked with ridding the land of a great evil. Far from the comforts of palaces and olive groves, in a dark, forbidding region in mountainous Corinthia, near Lake Stymphalus, lived a flock of monstrous birds. These were no ordinary creatures. No, the Stymphalian birds were foul, unnatural beings. Their feathers were sharp as daggers, their beaks thirsty for blood, and their screeches filled the air with terror. Their numbers were so vast that they darkened the skies and overshadowed the land, and even the sun itself struggled to shine through their oppressive presence. Day and night, these birds flew over the lands, bringing ruin to the people who lived near the lake. Crops withered under their shadow, livestock fell prey to their sharp claws, and even the bravest men dared not venture too close. The people cried out in despair, their hearts burdened with fear and hopelessness, for they could see no end to their suffering. It was then that the great king Eurystheus, in his wisdom, sent for Heracles. "Only you, O son of Zeus," he proclaimed, "can cleanse the skies of this cursed flock and bring peace to the land." Armed with a mighty bow and the wisdom of Athena, Athena gave Heracles a pair of bronze rattles, sometimes referred to as castanets, crafted by the god Hephaestus. These rattles created a loud noise that startled the birds and forced them into the sky. As the early morning mist rolled over the desolate shores of Lake Stymphalus, Hercules stood, surveying the eerie silence. The sky was heavy with shadows, yet not of clouds, but of the foul birds that plagued the land. The Stymphalian birds were not ordinary creatures. They had iron feathers sharper than the finest blades, and their cries echoed like the wails of tortured souls. These creatures embodied chaos, feeding off the fear and despair of the people who dared wander too close to their lair. Hercules, having been charged with the task to rid the land of these monstrous birds, did not tremble. His labors had taught him that the challenges laid before him were not mere physical trials, but reflections of the soul's journey through the labyrinth of existence. He knew that these birds represented more than a mere menace. They were manifestations of the soul's lower desires, the distractions that obscure the true essence of being. However, the task was difficult because the lake and its surrounding marshlands made it nearly impossible to approach the birds without them flying away. But Heracles, undaunted by the task, began shaking the rattles, and as soon as the birds lifted from the lake, he raised his bow and, with arrows swift as the north wind, shot at them. He felled the birds one by one until the skies were cleared and the land was freed from their shadow. The people rejoiced, for they were no longer plagued by the fearsome creatures, and once more the light of the sun graced their fields and homes. Now, this is the myth as we know it, the tale passed down from generation to generation. But let us step beyond the surface of the tale, my students, for like all great stories, there lies a deeper truth hidden within. The allegory of the Stymphalian birds. In a town near the shores of the dark Stymphalian lake, there lived a people who were tormented, not by monsters of flesh and blood, but by monsters of the mind. Their town was shrouded in gloom. The sun, though it rose and set as it always had, could scarcely reach them. The people were restless, miserable, and full of despair, and yet they could not understand the source of their suffering. It was not sickness or famine that plagued them. No, it was the birds. not birds of sharp beak or wing, but birds of a different kind, the birds of dark thoughts, bitter feelings, and troubled hearts. These birds hovered over their minds day and night, blocking out the light of the divine. They were the thoughts that darken the soul, the worries and anger that cloud the mind. These birds were the embodiment of their collective misery. They were the constant chatter of the minds of the people. The people did not realize that the birds were not merely external creatures, but the very reflections of their own hearts. The town had become a place where anger festered, where envy thrived, where hope withered. The citizens could not see the sun, the divine light that wished to reach them, because they allowed these dark birds to fill their skies. And so, the human souls of this town were trapped, unable to communicate with the divine realms. They lived in a state of disconnection from the gods, from truth, from virtue. They could no longer see the greater purpose of their lives, for the birds, their own thoughts, their own dark emotions, had blinded them to it. It was then that Heracles was sent, not just to slay birds, but to cleanse the skies of the soul. Heracles, the heroic soul, represents the strength of the human spirit in its purest form. He was not merely fighting physical creatures, but the dark forces of the mind that keep mankind in chains. The labor of Heracles is the labor that each of us must undertake. The birds that block the sun are the same that block the heart from reaching the divine. These birds must be faced, must be named, must be defeated. For only then can we, like the people of the town near the dark waters of Stymphalus, be freed from the chains of despair. Heracles teaches us that the path to wisdom, to truth, and to communion with the gods requires courage. It requires us to raise our bow against the dark forces within us and clear the sky so that the light of the divine may shine once more upon our souls. Indeed, the myth of Heracles and the Stymphalian birds, though ancient, still breathes life in the world we see around us today. Look around, and you shall find many cities across the globe, places where despair festers, where light struggles to penetrate the clouds of misery. These are cities not unlike the one near the dark waters of Lake Stymphalus. But in these modern times, what are the birds that darken the sky? What are the forces that weigh down upon the souls of the people, leading them away from truth and divine light? The answer lies in the shadows cast by today's media, a powerful force that has the ability to shape minds, control hearts, and manipulate thoughts. Just as the Stymphalian birds filled the skies of the ancient world, so too do these media forces hover above our modern cities, blocking the truth from reaching the hearts of the people. Their constant chatter creates dark clouds over our heads, preventing the soul from communicating with the divine in silence. This is why the silence of the mind is needed in order to hear the subtle vibrations of the upper realms. Let us first understand what these birds, these forces, represent in today's society. The Stymphalian birds were described as creatures with metal feathers, sharp and deadly, who terrorized the land and blotted out the sun. Today, these birds are the narratives spun by the media, which often spread fear, division, and despair. These are the forces that control the flow of information, and through that control, they shape the minds of the people, just as the birds controlled the skies over the ancient town. Consider the cities of our world that are trapped in cycles of poverty, violence, and hopelessness. Whether it be in war-torn regions, impoverished urban centers, or countries governed by oppressive regimes, the people suffer in ways that mirror the suffering of the ancient town by Lake Stymphalus. In these places, it is not simply hunger or disease that oppresses them, but a deeper malaise, a sense of disconnection from hope, from progress, from the possibility of a better future. The media, in many cases, becomes the loudest voice, filling the minds of the people with images of fear, hopelessness, and anger. Like the birds of the myth, these forces do not simply convey information. They dominate the skies of our consciousness, leaving little room for the light of truth or the warmth of genuine human connection. They feed on conflict, stoking divisions, creating an environment where distrust and despair flourish. But the birds are not all-powerful. They thrive on the minds of those who let them in, who allow their thoughts to be darkened. The same collective mind that was overcome with misery in the myth is what we see in many places today. A collective consciousness swayed by the constant bombardment of negative forces. Just as in the ancient tale, these dark forces do not only come from external sources, but they take root in the minds and hearts of the people. The media is but one aspect of it, though a powerful one. When we allow fear, anger, and disillusionment to be fed by these external forces, we become like the town under the shadow of the birds, cut off from the light, disconnected from our higher purpose. So, who will be our Heracles? Who will step forward to clear the skies of these dark forces? It is not a single hero we must look to, but the spirit of Heracles that lives within each of us. Heracles represents the courage of the human soul, the inner strength needed to confront not just external monsters, but the dark forces within our own minds. It is the collective action of people, those who seek truth, those who dare to question, those who fight for a better world, that will act as the arrows that bring down these birds. When the media and those who control it spread division, when they play upon the fears of the people, it is the duty of each individual to rise above, to not be swayed by the shadows. The task is no less daunting than Heracles' labor. Today, the birds are no longer just a distant myth, but a reality in the form of misinformation, propaganda, and the manipulation of truth. The challenge of our time is to confront these forces with the same courage and strength that Heracles showed when he faced the monstrous flock. Weakening the mind's chatter. This refers to the mental discipline needed to quiet unnecessary, distracting thoughts that arise from our lower or base nature. In mystical terms, these are the thoughts and emotions tied to the ego or worldly concerns. The birds, which escaped being shot, represent lingering thoughts or influences from the lower mental or emotional nature, issues or distractions that are not immediately overcome. While the arrows, focused insight and discipline, may have destroyed many of these distractions, some remain, representing stubborn or persistent negative tendencies that are harder to eliminate. The act of forcing the birds to flee and never return symbolizes a more lasting purification or control over these mental disturbances. In spiritual or mystical development, this suggests that through continued effort and mastery, like the bronze rattles representing specific techniques or rituals, the practitioner can permanently dispel disruptive influences, achieving a state of lasting peace and clarity. Bronze rattles. These represent additional spiritual tools or practices, beyond just focused discipline, that help ensure lingering negative tendencies or distractions are banished permanently. This can symbolize rituals, meditation, or the use of sound, such as mantras or chants, to cleanse the mind and space of negative energies. Birds staying away forever. Once the initial distractions, lower thoughts, are silenced through focus, there are additional, often subtler disturbances that must be dealt with. The rattles force these subtler elements away permanently, indicating a deeper level of purification and mastery. The forever aspect suggests that with the right tools and practices, lasting peace and inner silence can be achieved. So, Remember the myth of Heracles and the Stymphalian birds, but do not leave it in the past. Carry it with you into the present. For just as Heracles was called upon to fight the forces of darkness in ancient times, so too must we fight the dark forces that threaten to overshadow our world today. And know that the battle is not without hope, for the strength of Heracles, the strength of the human spirit, is always greater than the birds that would seek to darken our skies.